Running a marathon is no easy feat. It has the ability to make you feel on top of the world or bring you crashing back down to earth with a thump. The first step in making sure that you come away with a smiling face is being prepared. When I first decided to run a marathon, I had absolutely no idea where to start and what it would take. But after hundreds of hours of research, academic transcripts, and YouTube deep dives, I finally started to scratch the surface and somehow managed to come away with a time of 2 hours and 48 minutes. Should I just run more? How far should I aim to go? And what does a long run even mean? If you're asking any of these types of questions like I was, don't worry, you're in exactly the right place. By the end of this video, you're going to go away feeling like you've ticked off the basics. We're going to cover how to figure out your goal time, how many kilometers or miles a week you should be doing and how you should structure it, and what are the specific types of training you should be doing. So let's make sure your marathon ends with a smile, not a stumble. So figuring out your goal time. For some people, the idea of simply completing the marathon is enough, and that's awesome. But for the rest of you, you want to achieve a certain time and smash what you never thought was possible. The more accurate we can figure your approximate goal time, the more precise you can be in your training, which will in turn give you a greater probability of actually achieving your goal time. So a great place to start is with an online calculator, and a very common one I'll link below. And I'll also plug in some data here to get an understanding of how it works. So this will take a minimum level of understanding of how fast you can run over a certain distance. And the longer the distance, so the closer to a marathon it is, the more accurate it will be. So a 5K park run distance will give us an approximate marathon time that is less accurate than, say, a half marathon time. Also, the other thing to realise is that these calculators assume that you're as equally trained or as fit for each of the distances that they list. So if you're a specialist 5K runner who only ever trains for the 5K distance, the calculator will assume that you're also as equally trained for each of the other distances. And for that reason, it can seem a little bit ambitious, but it's better to aim high and shoot low in my opinion. So let's give you an example of where I pump in some of my data. I recently ran a 5K in 16 minutes 26 seconds. So once I enter in that pace, it gives me an equivalent time of what I can achieve in the marathon of 2 hours, 37 minutes and 31 seconds. Now again, this assumes that I'm equally as trained for the marathon as I would have been for the 5K. And considering I've just spent most of the Aussie summer speed training and only just started my marathon training block for Gold Coast coming up in July, I'm not in as good marathon shape as I am for the 5K. So that means that if I was to run a marathon tomorrow, I definitely wouldn't be able to achieve this time, even though I can achieve the 5K time. It's just an indicator of what I should be able to achieve if I were to be as well trained for the marathon as I was for the 5K, which I'm aiming to be. That being said, it still seems a little bit lofty, but it gives you a good basis to start with. So let's look at someone else that's recently run a park run in 22 minutes. The equivalent would be a marathon time of about 3 hours 30. So if that's you, remember that if you've been training hard for a park run PB of 22 minutes, you're going to have to be as marathon fit as you are 5K fit to run a 3 hour 30 marathon. And it takes more training time to be fitter at a longer distance than a shorter distance, purely because of the distance you need to cover in the race. How many kilometers or miles do I need to run a week and how do I structure it? Okay, so you figured out your goal time. Now to get to the hard work, training. Now the general principle to remember is that your volume needs to increase with the higher level of performance goal you have, as well as the amount of times that you're actually going to need to run. The two pretty much go hand in hand. So a 3 hour marathon runner will, in 99% of circumstances, have to run more in training than a 4 hour marathon runner. So let's look at some examples. A 4 hour marathoner will need to run the race at a pace of 5:41 a kilometre or 9:09 a mile. Now that might seem a bit ambitious for some, but if you're doing between 55 and 70 kilometres a week, so between 34 and 44 miles a week, breaking down into between 4 and 5 runs, it's actually quite achievable. The more towards a higher amount of mileage that you're doing, the more trained you're going to be, which will in turn increase the chances of you hitting your goal time. So let's take 4 runs a week. And this is what you should be working towards in your peak training weeks. So a long run of up to 32 to 35 kilometers, about 20 to 22 miles. Then an easy medium to long run of between 12 and 15 kilometers, so 7.5 and 9 miles. Then a tempo run of between 10 to 12 kilometers, so 6 to 7.5 miles. And then intervals, so 6 times 800 meter repeats or half mile repeats. And how this could look like is this. So Monday, my week always starts with a rest day, and you'll see why in a minute. Tuesday, intervals. Wednesday, rest day. Thursday, tempo. Friday, easy. Saturday, rest day. and then Sunday, your long run. Now, I'm a big believer in having a complete rest day on the legs and cardio system to allow the body to recover better. Especially if you're an older runner or have an autoimmune condition like I do, recovery can be a little bit more difficult. So taking your rest days after your longest run of the week is a good idea. For a 3 hour 30 marathon, you're going to need to run the race at 4:58 a kilometre or 7:58 a mile. And that will mean between around 70 to 90 kilometres or 44 to 56 miles a week of training. And that should consist of at least 5 runs, possibly even 6. Now, again, the more trained you are, the more chance you'll have of hitting that 3 hour 30 mark. So how this breaks down is a long run of building up to between 35 and 36 kilometres, so about 22 to 22 and a half miles with marathon pace segments thrown in. Midweek, then you've got an easy medium long run of about 14 to 18 kilometres, so 8.5 to 11 miles. Then maybe an interval session of 5 times 1 kilometre repeats, so it's 0.6 of a mile, or 3 times 2 kilometre repeats, so 1.25 mile. And then maybe a threshold or tempo run of 3 times 3 kilometre repeats, so 1.8 miles at threshold tempo type pace, and then between 1 and 2 easy runs. And how that could look like over the course of the week is like this. So again, your Monday, rest day, Tuesday, intervals, Wednesday, easy, Thursday, a threshold or tempo run, Friday, easy, Saturday, a rest day, and then Sunday, of course, your longie. Now, for a sub 3 hour marathon, you'll need to run the pace at 4 minutes 15 a kilometre or 6:50 a mile pace, with 90 to 120 kilometres, so about 56 to 75 miles a week of training. And that'll be broken down into between 6 and 7 runs. So how that'll be broken down is long runs with marathon pace segments thrown in of above 35 kilometres, so about 22 miles and upwards. Threshold sessions of up to 10 to 14 kilometres, so between 6 and 9 miles at 3 minute 45 or 4 minute kilometre pace. Then some intervals, so maybe looking at something like 8 times 1 kilometre repeats. A midweek medium to long run of between 14 and 20 kilometres, so between 9 and 12.5 miles. And then some recovery jogs thrown in, so between 8 and 10 kilometres, 5 and 6 miles. And how you could break this down over the course of the week, and often how my week looks like, is like this. So on a Monday, you can have a rest day, Tuesday, intervals, Wednesday, a midweek long run, Thursday, a threshold or tempo type session, Friday, easy, Saturday, easy, Sunday, long run. Now, when you're getting up to between 6 and 7 runs a week, this is where the concept of doubles comes in. And that's where you're going to go out twice a day to achieve your target mileage. So you're going to want to make sure that at least one of those runs is easy though. So you won't be doing an interval or a tempo run on the same day. So I've talked about all these different types of runs. What are the specific types of training that you should be doing? Guys, if you're enjoying this video, can I ask that you please like and subscribe? And that will help me bring you more marathon focused content. Back to the question. What are the specific types of runs that I've mentioned that we should be doing? So let's take the easy run. Now, this is where we can jump back into our calculator to give us some rough target paces that we should be running our easy sessions at. If you look here at a 3 hour 30 marathoner, you can see a rough target pace of between 5:37 to 6:11 a kilometre. So 9:02 mile to 9:56 a mile. The reason why easy runs are important is that they allow us to recover from our more intense sessions while still allowing us to increase our mileage and build our aerobic capacity. Use these times as a guide, as what's more important is that your heart rate is within zone 2, which is where you should be able to run and hold a conversation at the same time. See my recent video here that goes into much more detail about zone 2 and easy runs. Now, my top tip for this one is that you will probably be running these sessions too fast, because it's quite difficult to feel like you're gaining much from them at the time, or you might just get a bit bored. But trust the process, it is helping you more than you know. Put on a podcast and rack up those miles. Then we've got your faster stuff, which is intervals, threshold, tempo type runs. So again, let's dive back into the calculator to give us a rough understanding of the paces that we should be doing. So for your intervals, let's say 5 times 1 kilometre repeats. You're going to want to be hitting around 4 minute 18 kilometre pace for each interval, or about 6:55 a mile. So these are quick, pretty much all out reps where you're trying to get your heart rate as high as possible and push your body pretty close to the max. Then you've got your threshold runs, which could be something like 3 times 3 kilometres, where you're looking at a rough pace of about 4 minute 40 per kilometre, about 7 minute 30 a mile. Now this is longer but slower than a traditional interval, but it's aimed at getting your body used to working at a faster pace and increasing your body's running efficiency. Then lastly, you've got tempo runs. Now they're often timed for about 20 to 30 minutes and slower than the threshold runs. And you want to be able to feel like you're working for these ones, but not super hard, and at a speed that you can sustain for that entire period. Now, a top tip for this one is to make sure you're thoroughly warmed up for all speed sessions. Doing some light or easy jogging for a kilometre or two beforehand will definitely get you set. Then we've got the long run, or your longie as it's often called. Now, the long runs are mostly done at an easy effort, but you can throw in some faster paced race efforts as your training block progresses. So a 3:30 marathoner will probably top out about 35 kilometers, about 22 miles. You're aiming for time on your feet here, getting your body to build that endurance and resilience. And they're great confidence builders that help you mentally prepare for what it will take on the day. But equally as important, it's an opportunity for you to be able to prepare that more logistical aspects of running a marathon. So stuff like fueling, taking on water, making sure your race day gear works and that don't cause you any issues. If you're going to run a marathon, being prepared is essential. We've all heard the horror stories of friends who have turned up on race day with no preparation and had an absolute shocker. It's a fantastic experience and something you're always going to look back on and wish you'd given it a better go at. So don't sell yourself short. Give yourself the best opportunity to achieve the best time possible by being as prepared as possible. Fail to prepare is preparing to fail. Take a look at my video here for how to run your marathon faster with a lower heart rate by doing one simple thing. Ta-ra!